So good morning. So this week's parsha is called Vayishlach. Vayeshev. Take that back. This week's parsha is called Vayeshev. Last week was Vayishlach, which means he settled. It begins with Jacob settling. Jacob settled in the land of Canaan after 20 years in Haran by his uncle Lavan, where he had married two of his daughters and married two others and had 13 children, 12 boys and one girl. He's now finally back in Hebron, where his father Yitzchak lived. And now his children grow up over there. It doesn't last very long. His son Joseph, it doesn't get along with his other brothers. His brothers dislike him. Jacob, favors Joseph, favors Yosef, and makes a special cloak for him of fine wool. And so his brothers are jealous of him. Then Joseph has two dreams. One dream that he's binding bundles of wheat, and the others' bundles stand up and bow down to his bundle. And then he has another dream where the sun, moon, and 11 stars bow down to him, all taken by his brothers to mean that he's somehow going to rule over them. They hate him even more as a result. Then one day, his brothers are with the animals, watching the animals in Shechem, which is some distance from Hebron. Yaakov sends his son Yosef to go check on them. When he comes to them, they see him and they decide to, first they want to kill him, but they decide instead to, they grab him and throw him into one of the pits. His oldest brother Reuven tries to save him, but is unsuccessful, and instead they sell him as a slave to passing Yishmaelites, who would have been their relatives. Yishmael was a cousin of their grandfather, Yishmael was a brother of their grandfather Yitzchak. And they end up bringing him, they sell him to others. He ends up coming down to Egypt, where he's sold to a fellow called Potiphar, and he's going to work in Potiphar's house. The Torah then takes a little break from the story of Joseph and says that Yehuda, the brother who had suggested that they sell him, leaves the brothers as a result of this, and goes off, moves away from the rest of the family, and goes off on his own and gets married. He has 3 sons. He has a business partner where he's successful in his own herding business, like his father. And then one of his sons grow up. His oldest son grows up and gets married to a woman called Tamar. And then the oldest son, right after the marriage, dies. And so he asks Tamar to marry the next son. Tamar marries, as later the Levirate marriage would require. Tamar marries the next son, whose name is, the first one's Er, the second one's Onan, and he marries Onan, and she marries Onan, and Onan dies not long afterwards as well. Yehuda, the custom at the time would have required her to marry the third son. Yehuda didn't trust her anymore. He wasn't going to let her marry the third son, and so he said, "You go wait till my third son grows up. When he's a little bit older, I'll let you marry him." She sees that. She realizes that Yehuda is not going to let her marry the third son, and so she hears that Yehuda is traveling to shear his sheep, and so she goes to the crossroads, and over there on the crossroads, she stands there like a prostitute. Yehuda sees her, and he asks for her services. He offers her a sheep. She says, "What are you going to give me as a guarantee?" He gives he says, "Give me your stick and your signet ring and your cloak." He gives them to her, and he impregnates her. And then he hears a rumor that he hears that his daughter-in-law has become pregnant, and so he says that she should be burned to death, which was probably the tribal custom at the time for a woman who was designated for someone, what they did. And again, this is all before the Torah was given, and before she's taken out, she says, "I am pregnant to the man whom these belong to," and she pulls out his ring, his stick, and his cloak, and he recognizes it, and he says, "Yes, it was from me. It was my fault." And he then he doesn't harm her, and she then has twins, and those twins are Peretz and Chetzron, and Yehuda then raises them as his children. So that's Peretz will be the ancestor of later King David and many other prominent Jews later in Scripture. So that's a story told in the middle of the parsha. And then it goes back to Joseph's story, and it says how Joseph came down to Egypt. Over there, he works for a fellow called Potiphar. He becomes extremely successful over there. Potiphar puts him in charge of his entire house. He's in charge of everything. However, the only thing he doesn't trust him with is with his wife. Sure enough, sometime later, his wife starts trying to seduce Joseph, and Joseph keeps refusing her. And then one time she's alone in the house with him, and she grabs him by his cloak, and he leaves his cloak with her and runs outside. And she's upset at him. She decides to get him back for his refusals. And so when her husband comes home, she says, "This man tried to rape me," and accuses Joseph of trying to rape her, saying that when she started screaming, he left his cloak with her that she still had and ran out. And so Joseph, as a result, was thrown into prison. There in prison, he also worked hard, and Hashem was with him, and he was very successful. And over time, he was put in charge of the prison. And there in prison, he meets two of the king's servants. One is the king's baker, and the other one is the king's winemaker. And they both have dreams one morning, and Joseph sees that they are upset. He says, "Why are you upset?" They said, "We had dreams. Can you interpret them?" And so first the winemaker says, "In my dream, I was squeezing, I had 3 clusters of grapes, and I was squeezing them into Pharaoh's cup." Joseph says, "Your dream means that in 3 days, Pharaoh will return you back as his winemaker." Then the baker says, but then he asks the winemaker to please, when you go back to Pharaoh, please ask him to help me. I've been thrown in prison for doing nothing. I was falsely accused, and I was brought down to here. I was kidnapped and brought to here as a slave. I'd like to go home, and so please mention me to Pharaoh. And then the baker says his dream is that he had 3 baskets of bread on his head, and the birds were eating from the bread. And so he said and so Joseph says, the meaning of your dream is in 3 days, Pharaoh will have you hung. And indeed, Joseph's predictions happen, and the winemaker forgets about Joseph and does not mention him to Pharaoh. So that is the parsha in short. Any questions about the parsha? Yes, Debbie. This was before the Jewish people were a people, before the Torah was given. This would have been tribal custom at the time.
What happens if a man rapes a woman?
Back then, I don't know.
Well, they had that one thing where
I don't know. She's asking about what would happen before the Torah was given, what the tribal custom in the land of Canaan was 3,500 years ago. I don't know. Any other questions?
Well, what about that story about where they circumcised all the guys and then they killed them?
They did that too. That was because they raped Dinah. Yeah, that was unacceptable. Right. You have a good point. It would have been unacceptable to rape. They killed everyone. Very good point. Thank you.
Isn't that part of the parsha this week?
No, that was last week.
The Dinah story?
Any other questions? Okay, so this week we have the big holiday of Hanukkah. Starts this coming Thursday evening, and so it's a great Jewish holiday, one of 2 important rabbinic holidays that we have. We have Hanukkah and Purim. Hanukkah, just very, very briefly. Hanukkah celebrates, and we'll talk more about Hanukkah next week, but Hanukkah celebrates the victory of the Hashmonaim, which was a family of Kohanim from the priestly family. Their father was Matityahu, who had been a high priest, and he led them to battle against the Greeks. The Greeks had controlled Israel for, by this time, hundreds of years. However, in this time, the Greeks had banned Jewish practice, banned keeping kosher, required them to eat non-kosher, required them to turn the temple into an idolatrous temple, required them to ban the keeping of Shabbos, ban circumcision, ban study of Torah, and so they were not able to practice Judaism. So therefore, they rebelled. And although they were few, they fought back the Greeks until they were able to drive the Greeks out of the land of Israel. And so then they rededicated after having driven the Greeks out of Israel. They went back to the temple, which had been turned into an idolatrous temple by the Greeks. They destroyed the idols and they refurbished the temple and rededicated it. So Hanukkah, the word Hanukkah means rededication, because we're celebrating the rededication of the temple. And the festival of Hanukkah is celebrated with special additions to our prayers that we recite, but then also we light a menorah every single night of Hanukkah to commemorate how when they came to rededicate the temple, all the oil that had, the pure olive oil that they would use to light the menorah, had all been opened, the seals had been broken, and therefore could not be used to light the menorah. All they could find was one small jug of oil, and it was only enough to light for one day. They lit it, and miraculously it lit for 8 days until they were able to get new oil. And we'll talk about that miracle more in detail, God willing, next week. So because of that, we light a menorah, we light a candle for Hanukkah every single night. The Talmud mentions multiple different ways to do this mitzvah, but the prevailing custom, the universal custom today, is that everyone lights one candle the first night, the second night adds a candle, and then every single night we add a candle. Until the 8th night, we light 8 candles. In addition to the 8 lights of the menorah, we also have a shamash, a service candle, that we use to light the other candles. So we first light the shamash, that is a little bit away or higher than the other candles. The other candles are always straight in a row, and you use that candle to light the other candles. We light anything, you can really use anything that burns well for candles, as long as you have a wick and fuel. It works, so no matter what you use, there's many different types of creative menorahs out there today that you are welcome to use for your Hanukkah menorah. We light it after sundown, and ideally you should light it for long enough that it continues to burn for a half hour after it is fully dark. Or about an hour, till it burns for an hour after sundown. So what you can do is you can wait till it's fully dark and then burn those 30-minute candles. Some of the Hanukkah candles that they sell don't burn long enough, so just be aware of that. You want to make sure you get the longer candles, especially a lot of them will burn when they burn alone. On the first night of Hanukkah, they burn long enough, but when you have 8 candles, the increased heat makes them not burn long enough. So you should make sure you have candles that do burn long enough. Friday night, the first night is going to be Thursday evening. Friday night, we light before we light Shabbat candles. We light the Hanukkah candles, so you light them extra early. So you got to make sure that you have candles that can burn well over an hour until it goes a half hour after sundown, after it gets dark. So before candle lighting, you need about an hour and 20 minutes total for it to burn. So you should have longer candles. For Shabbat, on Saturday night, Motzei Shabbat, we have on Saturday night, Motzei Shabbat, we don't light it until after Shabbat is over. So once Shabbat is over, we do Havdalah, and then we light the Hanukkah candles. So then, in addition to the mitzvah of lighting candles, which is really the only mitzvah that we do, one should ideally add in celebrations and festivity for the holiday. There are many customs that have developed over Hanukkah. There's been a custom that developed to play dreidel. Whether that was kind of originally a spiritual thing or whether it started as gambling is somewhat debated. The commentaries write against gambling on Hanukkah because it appeared to have been widely done, although gambling is problematic in Jewish law, and we've done a class on gambling before. But dreidel is still a custom, and it's a great game to play. If you're not really playing for big money, just for small coins or for other toys or something, or for chocolate money. Today, everyone thinks the word gelt means chocolate. It doesn't, right? Gelt means money. It's also a custom to give out on Hanukkah, to give our children, it's Hanukkah gelt, which is money. We've always done that both on Purim and on Hanukkah. We give our children money. That's really what the word gelt came from, meant money that we gave the children. Someone came up with the idea of giving chocolate money. It's a lot cheaper. I know our non-Jewish neighbors like to give gifts, so some people have adopted that and give their children gifts instead, but the original Jewish custom has always been to give our children money on Hanukkah, or to give others money on Hanukkah. And then there are also certain foods that we eat on Hanukkah. We eat oily foods. We also eat dairy foods on Hanukkah. In Ashkenazic communities in Eastern Europe, they ate latkes, which are potato pancakes. In the Middle East, they ate donuts, sufganiyot, also fried, but also that's part of this. Those are all customs. The main mitzvah of Hanukkah is lighting the menorah. The Rebbe encouraged us that on Hanukkah, given that we live in a free country where we could express our Judaism open, and originally the mitzvah of Hanukkah was to be lit outdoors. That was originally, they would light in front of their homes, outdoors, in front of their courtyard by the street. Although we no longer do that because we could not do that in the many lands where we lived, they would have harmed us had we done that. Today we have the freedom to light outdoors. The Rebbe encouraged us that we should light the menorah outdoors publicly, and so we will be doing that. We have many, many public menorahs. We are covering, I think, every single night of Hanukkah this year. We will have a menorah lighting somewhere. I'll just give you the quick rundown. Thursday night, we're going to do a menorah lighting for the first time in Miramar Park, which is right next to Torrance Beach, down by the end of the Esplanade. And then not on Friday night, Shabbos. On Saturday night, they're doing their annual boat parade, holiday boat parade in Redondo Beach. There's going to be a Hanukkah boat at that boat, some Hanukkah boats at that boat parade. Then on Sunday, we're actually doing two events. Firstly, we started this last year, but they asked us to continue. We're going to do a Hanukkah celebration at SoFi Stadium during the Chargers game. That starts at 1:30 p.m. We'll be lighting menorah on the field, and they're giving out special shirts for those that come as part of the Jewish community. And then we're going to do our main Hanukkah event is in Hermosa Beach at the pier at 3:30. And then Monday we will have a Hanukkah celebration at Metlux in Manhattan Metlux Plaza behind the Shade Hotel in Manhattan Beach at 5:30. Then Tuesday we're going to have in Redondo Beach at the City Center on the City Hall on PCH at 5:30. Then Wednesday we're going to do it at Manhattan Village Mall, the shopping center. We do it outdoors with that new area they just built. Or it's now about 2-3 years old already. Also at 5:30, and then on Thursday we'll be in El Segundo in front of El Segundo City Hall. So every night we're doing something. The full list is in the emails that we sent out and on the cards. We will need a lot of volunteers. So anyone who's able to volunteer for any of those events I know already, we would greatly, greatly appreciate it. Let me take some questions about Hanukkah and then we'll get to our class. Yes, Marla?
I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard this like a Hanukkah menorah is not considered kosher unless it's straight. It can't like be decorated, like curved or anything.
Oh, yeah, they could be.
The candles should be in a row, should be straight in a row. But the menorah itself could have any decoration, it doesn't really matter.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yes, Steve?
Yeah, so, you're talking about how long the candles burn, but when I've looked at candles in the store, I don't see them rated for 30 minutes, 60 minutes.
They usually say on them how long they burn for. They should say on them.
Okay.
Buy them from the Torah store, then you know for sure they'll burn.
We have bigger ones in the Torah store, but they should say how long they burn for. Most of them do. Yes, Susan?
Do you like from left to right or right to left?
Excellent question. I'm glad you asked that. Excellent question. Excellent question. People, it's always confusing. We always light the newest candle first. So we put the candles in the right side of the menorah. So the first night, we light the candle on the right side of the menorah. The second night, we put two candles in the menorah. This one to the left is the newer one. So we're lighting from left to right.
No, right to right.
You start on the right and
The first night we light the right. The second, we light the one all the way on the right. The second one, we light the two candles to the right. The third night, we light the three candles to the right. But when we're actually lighting them, we light the newest candle first. So we light
when you
left
light
and right.
the newest candle first, you then start at the right side.
At the left side. We go on the left side, we go backwards. Yes. Yes, from left to right. Light the shamash.
No, you go all the way
Please.
backwards when you start. The left.
So you start at the
Light the shamash first, and then use the shamash to light the other candles.
But the shamash is oil. The one I have is all oil. Use the candle to light first.
Then you light the shamash first, yes. But ideally, the shamash should not be oil. And we have lots of candles and oil and lots of other Hanukkah options and menorahs at the Torah Center, which will be open this week. Definitely go by if you don't yet have. And please let us know after class or text me if you are able to volunteer for any or all those nights. We need lots and lots and lots of volunteers. We also have, so I think it's 20 menorahs in public places around the beach cities, including in stores, in a lot of the supermarkets, and in different areas. And we need people to take responsibility to make sure that it is lit, the correct number of candles every night, to go each evening, and just make sure the right number are lit. So if you're able to do that, also, please let me know. So with that, let's get to our topic for today. So you have to let me know afterwards. So today it's the Parsha. The Parsha speaks about Yosef and his parent and his father. And so our topic for today is a topic we wanted to discuss sometime, and we just, for whatever reason, didn't. We had other things that we wanted to cover too. But it's a very important topic, honoring parents. So the Torah tells us in the 10 Commandments, in the Aseret HaDibrot, honor your father and mother. Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha. The Torah also tells us in the portion of Kedoshim in Leviticus, Ish avi imo va'aviv tira'u. A man shall revere his mother and his father. So we have two mitzvahs, a mitzvah to honor your parents and a mitzvah to revere your parents. The Talmud describes what's the difference between honoring parents and revering parents. Honoring parents means giving them food, drink, clothing, taking them in, taking them out. Revering means not sitting in their place, not contradicting with them, not siding with somebody else who disagrees with them. So that's the way the Talmud describes the differences between honoring and revering. There is some debate among commentaries exactly how to differentiate between these two commandments. Some say honoring parents means caring for them, looking after them, taking care of their needs. Revering parents means showing respect for them, being careful not to harm them, being careful not to hurt them. Others say that honoring parents is the positive act. When you do something positive for your parents, you are honoring them. Revering parents is the negative. When you don't do something that will harm them, that's how you revere them. Regardless, we have both commandments, and it's clearly we are required to both honor and revere our parents. In addition to these commandments, there are also two additional specific commandments regarding parents. We are forbidden from hitting one's parents, and we are forbidden from cursing one's parents. The Torah says that one who hits or curses one's parents, there is a death penalty for doing so. Now, there are many commandments for which there is some 50 commandments for which there is a death penalty for transgressing the commandments. The death penalty is only the maximum penalty. It was generally not actually carried out. It was very, very difficult to actually carry out the death penalty when the death penalty was carried out. It was abolished about 2,000 years ago, so we haven't carried out death penalty in the last 2,000 years. But even when we had it, it was very rare. We previously did a class on the death penalty. But what's clear is, by giving us the maximum punishment, it is clear that hurting one's parents, whether hitting them or cursing them, is a very, very severe prohibition. When instructing to honor our parents, the Torah says, honor your father and mother. When instructing to revere our parents, the Torah says, revere your mother and father. The Talmud says the reason why the order is switched to teach us that both parents are equal. You must equally honor and equally revere both of your parents, both your father and your mother. The Midrash says that it says, honor your father and mother, which refers to caring for your parents, because a person naturally tends to care for their mother more than for their father. People tend to have a closer relationship with their mothers. It says, revere your mother before your father, because people seem to respect their father more than their mother. They have more of an awe or respect for their father. That's just human nature. The Torah is telling us the one that people are less likely to do first, to tell you that it is just as important. Regardless, we are required to honor and revere both of our parents. Now, generally, the 613 commandments that we were given are given to the Jewish people. We made a covenant with God at Mount Sinai that we would keep his 613 commandments. It is not for non-Jews. Non-Jews were not included in these 613 commandments. Rather, non-Jews are expected to keep what we call the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, the 7 Noahide laws. We previously did a class where we discussed the 7 Noahide laws, but there are 7 basic values that God expects all of humanity to keep. Now, the honoring parents is not one of the 7 Noahide laws. Yet it is clear from the Torah that non-Jews are expected to honor their parents. We see in the story of Noah, when Noah got drunk and his son Ham disrespected him, Noah cursed him for doing so. His sons Shem and Yefet respected him, they honored him, and he blessed them for doing so. Our sages even praised the wicked Esav for honoring his parents. Although he was a wicked man, he still honored his parents, and he got credit for that, for honoring his parents. So clearly there must be some expectation, though not one of the Noahide laws, for non-Jews to also honor their parents. And it's explained that the reason is that all the commandments that are part of common decency, even if they're not included in the Noahide laws, they are required for all of humanity. It is common decency and for a person to be expected to honor his parents. As most interpersonal commandments are also kind of matters of just the way we should treat each other, normal civilized behavior. So normal civilized behavior expects you to honor your parents. A decent person honors their parents. It's the right thing to do, and therefore all people, Jews and non-Jews, are required to honor their parents. And we are told, therefore, even a convert in Judaism is considered kekatan shenolad. They're considered born again, as if they're born from scratch when they convert. However, even so, they're still required to honor their biological parents. Why? You cannot lose a commandment as a result of converting. You only gain commandments when you become Jewish. You don't lose commandments. You can't. Till now you had to honor your parents, and now that you converted, you wouldn't have to anymore. That wouldn't be fair. So therefore, when you convert, you have to honor your parents. But it is clear that everyone is expected to honor their parents. Yes.
What about in cases of adoption?
Excellent question. So we'll deal with that in just a moment. So there's 2 primary reasons given for the mitzvah of honoring parents. One reason is that we should show appreciation to our parents. They were the ones who created us. They are the ones who raised us. And we have multiple mitzvot, multiple commandments that teach us the showing appreciation. It's among Jewish values, what we call midot, good character. One good character trait that we're supposed to focus on is if someone does good to us, we're supposed to show our appreciation. Even a parent who didn't raise us should still be appreciated just for creating us. Now, a parent who abused their child, we'll talk about that soon. But this is part of a general Torah value that we have to show appreciation. And no one has done more for us than our parents just by virtue of having created us. Even if they just created us and then abandoned us, they did the greatest good for us. They made us exist. Without them, we wouldn't be here to receive favors from anyone else. So that is the greatest thing, and we must show that appreciation. And this is even more so true for parents who cared for us from infancy through our formative years. Certainly, we should honor them. And so therefore, the mitzvah of honoring parents would apply to both parents who created us even if they didn't raise us, as well as parents who raised us, even if they didn't create us. Certainly, it would apply to parents who both created us and raised us, that we definitely show them a very great appreciation. A second reason given for this mitzvah is the Talmud tells us that every person has three parents: the father, mother, and Hashem, God. Without God, you would not be created. There are three parents in creating each child. And so therefore, when we respect and honor our parents, it is an extension of honoring the third parent, Hashem. It is part of honoring Hashem. We honor his other partners in our creation, namely our parents. The Ramban, Rav Moshe ben Nachman, points out that if you look at the Ten Commandments, to honor one's parents, kabed et avicha ve'et imecha, is commandment number 5. We know that the 10 Commandments were written on 2 tablets, 5 on one tablet and 5 on the other tablet. The first 5 on the first tablet are all mitzvot about God. I am the Lord your God, do not have any other gods, don't bear God's name in vain, don't keep Shabbat, honor parents. The last 5 are all about interpersonal relationships, how we should treat each other. Do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not bear false witness, do not be jealous. So honoring parents is then on the tablet of the God mitzvot, the mitzvot involving God. Why? Because the honoring parents is not just the way one should treat others. Honoring parents is really a way of respecting God. It's a way of how we should treat God. We honor parents. It is part of honoring God. So there are 3 general ways, regardless of how we split up the mitzvot of honoring parents and revering parents, kibud and mora in Hebrew. There are 3 general ways that we must honor and revere our parents. Firstly, we need to show our parents honor and respect. Secondly, we need to care for them, care for their needs. And thirdly, we have to be careful not to harm or upset them. So first we have to show them honor. We should show them honor by standing up when our parents enter the room. When someone respectful enters the room, one should stand up. Today, that was widely practiced among Jews for much of our history. It is still practiced in many Jewish communities. When anyone respectful walks into the room, a teacher walks into the room, a parent walks into the room, a rabbi walks into the room, everyone stands up. That's always been part of our history. Today, and it wasn't just in Jewish culture, it was true in many cultures where one would stand up. Today, in this country, it is not widely practiced that people stand up. It is also not widely practiced among Jews either that people stand up when their parents enter the room. Since it's no longer a kind of commonly practiced form of honoring someone, perhaps it is no longer required. The rule is if a parent doesn't mind if the child doesn't show them respect in a certain way, then the child doesn't have to. Today it's assumed that most parents don't expect their child to stand up for them. And we should also avoid sitting in our parents' place if they have a set place to sit. That would also be disrespectful. We should never contradict our parents or speak to them disrespectfully. So if they say something, you cannot say, "You're wrong, that's not true." You're not allowed to speak to your parents like that. You can respectfully disagree, but you cannot contradict them straight out. You can maybe say something like, don't you think that maybe this and this is what we should be doing? Or do you think in a way that is in a respectful way, and not in a way that you're arguing with them or contradicting them? We should also not call our parents by their name. both directly to them or when speaking to others. We should never call them by their name. One should be careful about that. So much so that Ashkenazic Jews, who we have a custom, we'll soon talk about it, to respect our parents by naming children after our parents. The Ashkenazic Jews don't name children after parents who are still alive, because we don't want to call our children by our parents' name and keep saying our parents' names, because that would be disrespectful to them. We should also, when speaking about them, we should always refer to them respectfully. Today in our current culture, we have all sorts of different disrespectful terms people use for their parents, to refer to parents in this country, and those are all wrong. Those should not be used. One should never speak to parents disrespectfully. Unfortunately, in this country, respecting parents is not and honoring parents is not a great value. I think many of our grandparents, when they came here, joked about how in this country they discovered Mother's Day and Father's Day, and the one place where people don't respect their parents, they've basically regulated respecting your parents to a single day, and you don't have to do it the rest of the year round. But unfortunately, our culture in this country is very much not to respect parents. And we should be aware of that, because Judaism frowns on that, right? We're supposed to respect our parents. We're also supposed to, not only should we refer to them respectfully, we should also always follow their instructions and do things that they ask us to do. There is some limit to that, we'll see soon. We should not go against their instructions. There's some limits to that, we'll soon see. But really, we should treat our parents as VIPs, as very important people, the way you treat an important person. Not contradict them, speak to them respectfully, the way you would speak to somebody of great importance. We should treat our parents in the same way. For us, they are the most important people. They are the greatest VIPs for ourselves, our own parents. Sorry?
No, this doesn't happen.
It should happen.
But it doesn't.
In addition to the mitzvah of caring for, of honoring and respecting one's parents, one must also care for one's parents. One must feed them, one must clothe them, look after their needs, get things for them if they need, take care of them. They should care for their parents in any way that they need. If the parents can care for themselves and don't need the child, then the child is not required to. But if the parent does need the child to help them out with things, the child should always be ready to help out the parent in any way they need. As parents age, we should care for their medical needs. And as it becomes harder for them to take care of themselves, we should make more of an effort to take care of them. Now, to be clear, a child is not required to spend money on their parents. We are not required to dip into our own money to care for our parents if our parents have the money to take care of themselves. Let them use their own money. We are not required to pay for them if they have the ability to pay for themselves. We have to spend time and energy to care for our parents, but we could use their money to spend on their needs. Now, if our parents don't have any money to cover their needs, then if we are able to, we are obligated to care for our parents and supply them with money to care for them, because it's a charity. We have a mitzvah of tzedakah, of giving charity, and the first people that we have to give tzedakah to are our own parents. So we must care for them as best as we can, as best as our own ability is to care for our parents. So if the parents have money, we don't need to pay our own money. If they don't, then we have a mitzvah to give them tzedakah, to give them charity, just as we would to anyone else, but more so before we would to anyone else. Parents come first. So we should then care for them if we have the ability to do so. Now, as parents get older, we do have a need to care for them. There is some limit, as we'll soon see. Sometimes it can be very, very taxing to care for elderly parents. It can be very difficult, but we should do our best and should do what we can to care for parents. Don't tell them you're on your own. Take care of yourself. Put them in a facility and say, And then you never have to go visit. Just come once a year on Mother's Day to go visit. We're supposed to constantly care for them, constantly go to see them, constantly look after them. Although we don't need to spend money caring for them. We do need to spend time caring for them, including going to visit them. And even if that means we lose out on work, or we lose or cost money to travel to them, we still have to go see them. It's part of caring for parents is to regularly see them as regularly as we realistically can, and in order to make sure that their needs are taken care of, in order to make sure they know that there's someone, that they have a child who looks after them. In addition to respecting them, honoring them, the third part of honoring and revering parents is to be careful never to harm or upset one's parents. Earlier, we spoke of the severe prohibition of never physically hurting one's parents and never cursing one's parents. But we're also not to upset them by contradicting them, by insulting them, by arguing with them. Anything that you do that will get your parent upset is forbidden. We're also not supposed to tell them off, put them down in any way. Anything that will be emotionally hurtful to them, that they will find hurtful, you should not do. One should also not go against their instructions in a way that's going to get them upset, right? If it's going to get them upset, we should be careful not to upset our parents, or do anything to upset our parents. How far must we go to honor, respect, revere our parents? So the Talmud, the Midrashim have a number of beautiful stories of people who went to great lengths to honor their parents. The Talmud in Kiddushin tells about a non-Jew, a Roman, called Dama ben Natina of Ashkelon, who had a precious jewel, a jasper stone, which was one of the jewels of the breastplate of the high priest. And they were missing that jewel. They were going to, for the breastplate, they were going to purchase it from him. They came to purchase it for 60,000 gold coins, an exorbitant sum. When they came to purchase it, he refused to sell it to them. He said the key to the safe where the jewel is under his father's pillow. And his father is sleeping. And he refused to wake his father, even though he knew they could go elsewhere and get it somewhere else. And he would lose that great big sale. He refused to wake his father to sell it. The Talmud says later he was rewarded. One of his cows gave birth to a red cow. We know the red cow is used by Jews, was used during temple times in order to produce the ashes that was then mixed with water that we would use to sprinkle on someone who had come in contact with the dead, for them to become ritually pure, to allow them to go into the temple and eat sacrificial meat. And so the red cow was very valuable and it's very rare. So it's worth a very, very large amount of money. He ended up making the entire amount of money that he lost for not selling the jewel, he ended up making by selling the red cow. Another story the Talmud tells about the same Roman Dama ben Natina. He was once wearing a golden robe and sitting among Roman nobles. He seems to have been a Roman nobleman himself. And while he was sitting there, his mother came. She was upset at him over something. She tore in front of everyone. She tore his robe and hit him on his head in front of everyone. And he did not humiliate her. He did not get upset at her. He respected his mother. Now, although, as we'll see, there are limits to what you have to do for your parents if they harm you. However, once they've already, and you definitely do not have to submit yourself to be harmed, but once they have harmed you, that doesn't give you the license to then humiliate them or to then insult them, to scream at them. Another story is told in the Jerusalem Talmud about Rabbi Tarfon, whose mother went for a walk with him in her courtyard, and her slipper broke. And so she did not want to put her foot on the ground, and so Rabbi Tarfon put his hands under her feet and went with her crawling with his hands under her feet until he brought her back to her bed. The Jerusalem Talmud says that a person can feed their father stuffed meats and be punished, and someone can make their father grind millstones and be rewarded. And the Talmud tells the following stories. There was somebody who would feed their father stuffed chicken, which was very valuable, a delicacy. Once his father asked him, "Where are you getting these from?" And he responded, "Just be quiet and eat, like the dogs that eat quietly." And though he was feeding his father high quality meats or high quality chicken, he would be punished for having spoken to his father and treating his father in that way. So if you don't speak to them respectfully, don't treat them respectfully, even if you feed them the best foods, you're still punished for not treating them respectfully. Another person, his father was drafted by the king to work for the government, and working for the government could be very difficult. You could be beaten and harmed for doing so. The son had a job grinding millstones. He told his father, "If you take my job, I'll go work for the king for you. I'll go take your place in the draft." And so though he made his father grind millstones, he was rewarded because he saved his father from the draft where people were mistreated, and he had kept his father out of that mistreatment. So it's not about what exactly you give them, but what your intention is. In other words, are you helping them, trying to care for them, do better for them, or are you mistreating them? Even if you're giving them the best, you could still be mistreating them. Yes?
What if a child sees a father beating up his mother?
Excellent question. What about bad parents?
Yeah.
I'm going to get to that. Very good question.
Something,
Very good question. If you see
let him do it.
If you see anyone hurting another person, you have an obligation to save the person who is being hurt. Whether you should respect in any way you can. Once they are no longer hurting them, whether you need to respect a wicked parent, I'm going to get to. So when the Torah says that one must revere one's parents, ish imo va'aviv tira'u, it then continues and says, Ve'et shabtotai tishmoru. You must keep my Shabbat, Ani Hashem, I am Hashem. Our sages say the two are next to each other. Revere parents and keep Shabbat, to tell you, if your parents say to desecrate the Shabbat, do not listen to them. For that matter, if your parents tell you to transgress any of God's commandments or go against anything that God wants you to do not listen to them. Why? Because your parents are also required to keep God's commandments. And not only are they required to keep God's commandments, they are required to ensure that you keep God's commandments, because we are all required to ensure that everybody else keeps the commandments. And so therefore, if your parent tells you to do something wrong, you are not allowed to listen to them. If they tell you to do something you shouldn't do, you're not supposed to listen to them. Even if they tell you something like, do not study Torah, do not listen to them. Because you need to, it's a requirement to study Torah. So if they tell you that you should, to do something or not to do something that is unethical or wrong or against the Torah, one should not listen to one's parents. There are also limits to how much a child really needs to honor their parents. We mentioned earlier already that a child is not required to spend their own money for their parents if the parents can have money to take care of themselves. So while we need to spend time, energy to respect and honor our parents, we don't need to spend money for our parents unless the parents themselves have no money, and we do, then simply tzedakah, charity, we are required to give our parents. A child is also not required to face great loss or be harmed for their parents. So you don't have to quit your job to go take care of your parents. You don't have to be harmed, put yourself in harm's way for your parents. One is required to spend time to care for their parents, even if that means you're going to lose some time from work and you're going to lose money as a result. But one is not expected to lose significant amount of money for their parents. Furthermore, if a child feels that they should be doing something, going to school, marrying someone that they want, living in a certain place, or hanging out with a particular friend. They are not required to listen to their parents who tell them otherwise. If their parents say, can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? They should listen to their parents. But if the parent tells the child something minor that's not going to make a difference, major difference in their lives, they are required to listen to their parents. But if your parents tell you something that is a major thing in life, don't marry that girl, then you're not required to listen to your parents. Now, it might often be wise to listen to your parents. Often your parents are wise, especially if you're young. Your parents have greater life wisdom, and assuming that they really care for you, they know what's really best for you. So I'm not saying don't listen to your parents. Chances are they're probably right, but you're not required to if you feel your parents are mistaken. They don't understand her, they misjudge her, they don't like the career you're going into, but you feel that's the right career for you. Again, often your parents are right regardless, but you're not required to listen to your parents. However, you cannot harm your parents to make money or to avoid losing money, which is why Dama ben Natina, he wasn't Jewish himself, but we praise him for not waking his father, even though he lost out on a big deal. Because you cannot wake your parents or harm your parents, even if it's a minor harm in some way, in order to make money yourself. In order to do a deal, you cannot harm your parents in order to somehow make money for yourself. So you're not allowed to actively harm your parents to do something that will help yourself. But you don't have to necessarily listen to them. Now, for the Dam ben Natina case, if the child thinks that the parent would prefer to be woken up so that they could do this deal, then they definitely should wake their parents. If you know your parents under this circumstance would want you to wake them, then definitely you should. But for some reason, his father, he thought, would not appreciate being woken up, even if it means him losing out on this 60,000 gold coin deal. Now, while we're not required to spend money, ruin our career, ruin our marriage to care for our parents, we should spend time and energy to care for them. And this is especially true for elderly parents. As our parents age, it's very taxing. It's very hard to take care of elderly parents. That has always been the case throughout history. And Jews have always historically taken care of elderly parents. Other cultures do not. Some cultures do, some cultures don't. Jews always do. We care for our elderly parents. Now, it can be difficult. It can be complicated sometimes. We are not required to spend money that we don't have or spend money that our parents don't have to care for our parents. We're not required to ruin our careers, to ruin our marriages to care for our elderly parents, but we definitely should spend whatever time and energy we can to care for them. And definitely whatever we do, and if we go above and beyond, if we do decide, if we're able to do it, to quit our job to care for a parent, I mean, that's of course a great mitzvah. It's important to always look after them. There's a story told about this kid who goes to visit his grandfather, and his grandfather is freezing cold, and he doesn't have something to cover himself with. And so he comes home and he tells his father, I was by grandpa, and he needs a blanket. He doesn't even have a blanket. So he says, go to the attic and go get an old blanket for your grandfather and go give it to him. So he goes and he gets the blanket, and then he goes and he gets a scissors and he starts cutting the blanket. And his father says, what are you doing? Why are you cutting that blanket? He said, oh, because half I'm going to give to grandpa and the other half I'm going to save for when you get old. And the moral, I don't know if this story ever actually happened, but the moral of the story is that the way we treat our parents is the way our children will treat us. If we treat our parents with great care, go above and beyond, and look, not 100%, doesn't always work that way, but most of the time. It doesn't always work that way, you're right. But most of the time, if we go above and beyond and treat our parents well, then our children will see what we did. We show by example, and then when we get to that point, they will treat us well as well.
When you have your child, and my parents weren't alive, so she didn't know how I treated my parents.
What if parents are wicked, bad parents? What if they have harmed their child? So there's some debate among Jewish scholars as to whether there is still a requirement to honor a evil parent or not. There are those who say that one is still required to honor an evil parent. After all, they still created you. They are still God's partner in your creation. You still have a requirement to honor them. There are others that say no, since they are wicked, the commandment to honor parents is only for people who are good, not for evil people. Even if one is obligated to honor one's parents, if it is difficult to do so, in other words, if honoring your parents puts you in harm's way because your parents are still abusive, or because it brings back trauma memories from when you were younger, then you should then go elsewhere and not see them, so that you can go elsewhere so that you are not required to honor them. The Talmud says of Rav Asi. Rav Asi's mother was very demanding of him. First, she insisted that he buy her jewelry. So he did that. He bought her the jewelry. Then she insisted that he find her a husband. And it became, she was nagging him from one thing to the next. And he had enough. And so he was living in Babylonia at the time. And he moved to the land of Israel in order to get away from his mother. He should not have to respect her because it was very difficult to do so. So you can, one generally should try to be near their parents, or in a way that they can take care of their parents. But if it is an abusive parent or a parent who makes their lives very, very difficult, and very, very hard to work with, then even though you may be obliged to, so according to some, you can go elsewhere to avoid that obligation. Now, even according to those who would say that it's not required to honor wicked parents, you still are not allowed to insult your parents or harm them in any way. They are still your parents. So you have to be careful, even though you may not have to go and care for them and show them respect and treat them with respect, you still cannot insult them. You still cannot harm them. You still cannot scream at them or argue with them or contradict them. They're still your parents. Even after death, it is still a mitzvah to honor our parents, not only when they're alive. We honor our parents after death, and we have many different ways in Jewish law, Jewish traditions, that we honor our parents after death. Firstly, when our parents die, we have a custom to recite Kaddish for our parents. The Kaddish brings great honor, great merit to their soul in the next world, where they are now after they have died. But it's a mitzvah for a child to recite Kaddish for their parents. If there's no child, anyone else can do it. But ideally, the child should recite Kaddish for their parents. In addition, when we lose a loved one, we lose a relative, we sit Shiva for 7 days, and then we sit Shloshim, we continue mourning for 30 days after the burial. For parents, when our parents die, we mourn for 12 months, for an entire year after our parents die. Also, after our parents die, in the first year, whenever we mention our parents, we always add the words, Hareini kaparat mishkavo. I shall atone for their death. Every time we mention them, we say, Hareini kaparat mishkavo, I shall atone for their death. Or often people will add the acronym after mentioning their parents in writing, He Kaf Mem. After the first 12 months, we add the words, whenever we mention them, we always add the words, Zichrono livracha for your dad, Zichrona livracha for your mother. May his memory be for blessing. Or often it's with the acronym Zayin Lamed, which Zayin Lamed, which stands for Zichrono livracha. I've seen people do it in English, OBM, of blessed memory. But we should always add that when writing about, speaking about parents who have since passed, whenever you mention them, always add those words. It's a way of showing respect for our parents. We also have a custom, as I mentioned earlier, that we name children after parents. In some communities, they name even after parents that are alive, mostly in some Sephardic communities. Most Jewish communities only name after parents after they have passed. As I mentioned before, we don't want to call children by our parents' name, using our parents' first names while they're alive. After death, we name after our children, after our parents. It's a way of respecting our parents. Yes, Marla.
So, may the memory be a blessing. I understand it's a kind thing to say. I shall atone for their death. What does that mean?
It means that whatever harm they get in death, or whatever suffering they're getting in death, my actions should atone for it. My actions should cleanse them and help them. The reason is we have a tradition for the first 12 months of someone after someone dies, they go through various stages of suffering for the actions they did while they were alive. And so because we want to atone for that, that's why we do the Kaddish for 11 months. And same reason we say that I should atone for anything they've done. So yes, Ronnie.
What does it mean? What does it mean, should I atone? That means
That my actions should be tshuva, should be repentance, should atone, should bring atonement for anything that they may be suffering for in the next world. No, it means my good actions should bring kapara, should counter any negativity they may have. So the Torah only mentions honoring parents. However, the Talmud says, just as you are required to honor parents, you are also required to honor your in-laws, your spouse's parents. It says, the Torah says, Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha. Honor et your mother, et your father. Et is a word in Hebrew that doesn't really mean anything, but is thrown in there. And our sages say the reason that extra word is coming to teach you to also honor your in-laws, your mother-in-law and your father-in-law. You should honor them as well. Now, because it doesn't say explicitly in the Torah, we must honor our parents before we honor our in-laws. In other words, if it's a choice between your parents and your in-laws, your parents come first. But you must honor your in-laws as well, and help your spouse honoring your in-laws. I know some people find that difficult, but one should do so. In many Jewish communities, they would call their in-laws parents, right? They would call them father, dad, mom, their in-laws as well. It was very, very common historically in various Jewish communities because we are required to honor our in-laws.
Maybe you should change the word to
Respect.
respect.
It's not just respect. It's not just respect. It's also honoring them and caring for them. The Talmud also says that we are required to honor older siblings. There is some debate among Rishonim, among medieval scholars, is that only your oldest sibling, or is that all your older siblings, but you should honor your older siblings as well. Clearly, you do not need to honor them in the same way you would respect your parents and care for your parents, but one should show respect for older siblings as well. There is further debate about honoring grandparents. The Torah doesn't say anywhere one should honor grandparents, and there seems to be some evidence that it's not necessarily a mitzvah to honor grandparents. However, your parents are required to honor their parents. So by honoring your grandparents, you're really honoring your own parents, right? Because you're helping them in their mitzvah of honoring their parents, and therefore one should honor and show respect and care for grandparents as well as an extension of caring for their parents. Now, most commandments in the Torah, of the 630 commandments, almost all of them, it just tells you what you should do or what you should not do. It doesn't say what will happen if you do it. One of the few mitzvot, one of the few commandments in the Torah where it gives us what will happen if we do it is honoring your parents. In the 10 Commandments, it says, Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha, honor your father and your mother, leman yarichun yamecha, so that your days are lengthened. If you honor your parents, you will live a long life. There's some debate whether that means actually long years or it means a more fulfilling life. Others suggest it means a long life in the next world. In other words, a good life in the world to come. Go to Gan Eden, go to the Garden of Eden, where we believe the souls go after we die. But we will be rewarded for honoring our parents. Our sages say in the Mishnah that honoring parents is a mitzvah. Most mitzvahs, you don't get to see reward for fulfilling them in this world. You only get to see the reward after death, in the next world, in the world to come, as we call it, Olam Haba. However, honoring parents is one of the commandments where you will be rewarded. You will, in this world and in the world to come. You will get the dividends in this world, and the primary reward will come in the world to come after death. But we will be directly rewarded in this world for honoring parents if we care for our parents. And it's always been a very important Jewish thing that we look after our parents. We've cared for our parents. Many of us have probably seen our parents care for their parents. And it's always been something that Jews have done. And perhaps the reason in Judaism why honoring parents, this has been suggested, why it's so important, why is it so central, why is it one of the 10 commandments? Because what keeps Judaism going as a religion, as a nation, what keeps us going after over 3,300 years, we're still here, is that each generation passes on the tradition and the Torah to the next generation. And we are following the previous generations. So we are today, when we follow the Torah, we are following the same Torah that our parents followed, that our grandparents followed, that our great-grandparents followed. So tradition, keeping the tradition and keeping it going from generation to generation is really what keeps Judaism alive, what has kept Judaism alive all these years. You can only have tradition if we respect the previous generation. If you don't respect your elders and don't respect your parents, you don't have a tradition. You don't have something from the previous generation. One of the reasons I believe that our current culture doesn't value respecting parents is because we live in a culture where we're told, don't trust anyone over 30. We live in a culture where we're told, where the kids are told that they're the ones that the kids in college are the ones that tell the professors what to do. They're the ones that decide the way the world should run, that the world should be run by kids, and they have figured it all out, and everyone above them, everyone older than them don't know it. Judaism is the opposite. We believe that our tradition is from our grandparents. Wisdom lies in our ancestry. The Torah says, Sha'al avicha v'yagedcha zekeinecha v'yomru lach. Ask your father, and he will tell you. Ask your elders, and they will tell you the traditions. Find out your ancestry. Find out your traditions. Find out where you came from. That's why Jews have always been very into genealogy. Now genealogy has become big everywhere. But Jews have always been very into genealogy. We had long lists of our ancestry because we want to keep that tradition alive. So honoring parents is really a part of keeping that tradition alive. And doing so, it can sometimes be very difficult, but doing so is a very, very great mitzvah for which you are rewarded both in this world and in the world to come. I thank you all for joining. Thank you again, Eric, for sponsoring our breakfast. For those who wish to stay now at 11 o'clock, we're going to be doing outdoors, a gift wrapping. We'll be wrapping gifts for children in need. So you're welcome to stay. It's right outside in the yard outside. And then I hope to see you all at our many Hanukkah events over Hanukkah. Please let me know if you are able to volunteer for any of the many, many events that we are doing. And next week we will be back. Next week our topic will be the famous Hanukkah riddle. Famous Hanukkah riddle.